Europe's cybersecurity market is massive, yet the very structure of this market is stopping its own companies from winning.
The European market is one of the biggest markets in cybersecurity in the world. It's a challenge for European startups to grow on it at very early stage because it's very fragmented.
While the rest of the world pours resources into cyber innovation, Europe is left with a dangerous funding gap.
Israel alone was investing almost the double of what EU was investing in cybersecurity.
This isn't just about software. It's about control over the very technology stack that powers the modern economy.
The tech stack is controlled pretty much by non-European countries. We should be concerned.
Meanwhile, criminals are operating at a scale we've never seen before, and they're better funded than the defenders.
The cybercrime market is worth 10 trillion.
And now, AI has entered the fight, turning attacks way faster, smarter, and much harder to stop.
Attackers are using AI as well. And so they are always looking for ways to scale.
This is Carlos Moreira da Silva on the urgent race to turn Europe's weakness into its greatest advantage. Listen to the full conversation on the EUVC podcast.
We're hosting an exclusive off-the-record LP AMAs, bringing together the people behind the capital who are shaping the next generation of venture funds. If you're in the middle of raising a fund or planning to and want to understand how LPs actually make decisions, this is the room you want to be in. No pitch decks, no posturing, no script. Just honest conversations between GPs and LPs. The upcoming AMA on the 21st of August is held by Jonathan Sibilia, partner at Bullhound Capital and one of Europe's most experienced LPs. Before Bullhound, he led fund of funds and secondaries at Molten Ventures for 16 years, deploying into 80 plus VC funds and backing breakout names like UiPath, Revolut, and Ledger. Jonathan brings a rare dual lens of direct investments and secondaries across thousands of fund reviews and real DPI outcomes. This is your chance to ask one of Europe's sharpest LPs how they really assess managers, secondaries, exit strategies, and what most GPs still get wrong, or anything else you're dying to know. Access to these AMAs are limited to EUVC community members. Don't miss your chance to be in the room. Head to eu.vc/subscribe to save your seat.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
Welcome back, everyone, to This Week on the EUVC podcast. And we're diving into Europe's cybersecurity moment with Carlos Moreira da Silva. I have tried as best as I can to learn Portuguese pronunciation. I'm not really nailing it yet, but I hope everyone was at least somewhat pleased with that. Carlos, you're the co-founder of 33N, a conviction-led fund backing the next generation of cybersecurity and infrastructure founders in Europe. And you're bringing to this a rare edge because you're blending deep B2B operator experience on the one side with, of course, the sharp investor insight on the other. We will explore today the underfunded and misunderstood state of cybersecurity in Europe, what a great cybersecurity investor should look for in startups, and how the fragmentation might just be Europe's biggest assets, especially if we learn how to navigate it. So, Carlos, you're also part of the I do believe, founding committee behind the ECSO organization, the European Cybersecurity Organization. And maybe we could start right there to begin with. Tell me about ECSO and why ECSO is important at this time.
Look, first of all, thanks for having us at this podcast. It's a pleasure to be here and to explain about the challenges that the European cybersecurity ecosystem is going through and what we are doing to foster the ecosystem all across Europe. And ECSO is relevant exactly on that context, right? ECSO is the association of most of the entities across Europe in cybersecurity, and has been pushing for a stronger and more dynamic sector in Europe. ECSO started back in 2015, 16, and at that time, I believe probably the name cybersecurity didn't even exist, right? So it was InfoSec and things like that, right? Or it was very close to that. If we remember the situation back then, there was not even a forum for cybersecurity startups to meet investors in Europe. There were forums like this in the US, so RSA was already quite established. In UK, there were also some quite strong events, but in EU, it was very scattered. It was really tough for an European cybersecurity startup to meet with investors. And that's why there was this group, the investors working group created within ECSO, from which I'm a share, exactly to foster that ecosystem, to bring together all startups, to create a critical mass so that investors could be interested in attending those events, to create more interactions between both sides. A few years fast forward, so we started also analyzing which were the challenges, the other challenges of the ecosystem. And one of them was really relevant, right? The gap of investment between Europe, Israel, and the US. So basically, Israel alone was investing almost the double of what EU was investing in cybersecurity. And regarding how do we compare with the US, so Europe was more or less 30% of the global market, and the US around 40. And then on the investment side, the gap was really huge, almost 1/10. So we started trying to launch some initiatives to further reinforce the investment ecosystem in Europe. After that, there was this launch of an advisory study by the European Investment Bank, reaching to the conclusion that there was an annual gap in Europe of 1 to 2 billion in cybersecurity startups. So this is a bit the base to set the context as it is today. There are several initiatives to try to close this gap, but I believe it's a good starting point for our conversation.
And that was a bit the nerdy insider perspective on it, the state of the ecosystem. If we then try and zoom out and look at the cybersecurity threat that we are experiencing in Europe, one could frame it as saying that there's an intensification and absolute sophistication of cybersecurity threats that are reshaping the geopolitical investment landscape. That's a big headline. Could you unpack that a bit and tell me what are we seeing that's making it all the more important that Europe gets more focused around cybersecurity?
First, it's not just about cyber, right? When the tech stack is controlled pretty much by non-European countries, we should be concerned on being able for our companies to be competitive in what regards access to new technology, to emerging technology that can help them get to that position of being competitive. If added to this, European companies are also, or maybe also in a disadvantage of having access to that stack in a secure way, then the concern is even bigger, right? And the tech stack has been evolving a lot. So first the cloud, now the AI stack, and Europe is becoming behind. And so it's even more relevant for us to have our autonomy on the security side, right? It's not only relevant, it's even mandatory when this also becomes a relevant part of the European defense, right? So one of the areas of defense is for sure cybersecurity, and of course we need to play. It's not about protectionism, right? That I like to underline. It's being able to play on a level playing field and able to build our own worldwide segment leaders, right? That's what is at stake.
Where are you seeing within cybersecurity the biggest vectors, so to say, for startup origination to happen?
Europe, I believe we have a significant motivation to create emerging startups. We have excellent universities. We have excellent tech knowledge. If a few years before what we were seeing coming from Europe were basically companies that already, so similar to the ones that had already emerged on other regions like Israel and the US. Now it's not that case any longer. What we are seeing right now are startups in Europe that are appearing at the same time on very emerging spaces than in other regions. So the challenge right now is not so much having the early stage startups on interesting segments, is how to support them to be able to create those global category leaders, right? Because if startups are not playing on the same conditions or backed by the same conditions as the international peers are, then they will be left behind. There has been a lot of investment on the very, very early stage in Europe, in several countries. What is now a challenge is that exactly that fragmentation. We have seen several countries in Europe putting a lot of cash on very early stage, but we need to have a more holistic approach to it, right? Not just country by country, but at a full European level.
What do you see being done? Where do you position yourself? What's the work that ECSO does to help mobilize this?
That's a bit what I've touched at the beginning, right? So first, we had to raise the conscience that the European market is one of the biggest markets in cybersecurity in the world. And so we are a market that is quite attractive for companies from outside to come, and essential. If a company from abroad wants to become a global category leader, it needs to come to Europe. So Europe is a very interesting market. Now, it's a challenge for European startups to grow on it at very early stage because it's very fragmented. So that's why we need to end that fragmentation, right? And just by bringing startups from all Europe corners together, do events all across Europe, bringing those startups, investors, there has been made a lot of progress. Because right now, Europe in cybersecurity early stage has really this platform for exposing innovation to investors. Regarding the challenge of scaling these startups, what we realize is that the best ones attract them to change to other geographies. When in Europe, we don't have the funds with the size, with the specialization to be able to duly support those companies to scale in a competitive way with their international counterparts. And so that's why ECSO has been pushing for the creation of a European investment platform that could enable European funds focus or specialize in cybersecurity and thus able to really support those companies to scale, to have larger funds and to be able to compete with their international peers.
Is it a requirement that the funds are specialists in cybersecurity, or does cybersecurity lend itself perfectly well for generalist investors?
Cybersecurity, it's a very complex ecosystem. We believe it's really key for investors to be specialized, even because when we look at other geographies, that path has already been done. When you look to Israel or to US, so the geographies where there is enough critical mass, investors have already became specialized or have specialized funds exactly to be able to support these companies in the best way. And so if in Europe we don't have specialized funds, we will not be able to support these companies in the same conditions. That's our profound belief. That can be explained with access to talent, the support on getting these companies the best positioning, advising them on the best way on the go-to-market, and so on.
Can you expand a bit on the funding initiative that you described just before? I don't know to what extent it's public, so.
Not so much public at the moment, right? We know that there's a lot of backing by public institutions, by several countries around Europe. And so eventually we'll know something more in the next months. But it's good to see that the community has already realized that something needs to be done, and that there is a lot of support for something to happen.
Yeah. Can you tell me a bit about, because it is quite significant that there's getting to be actual real support from the major institutions. Could you tell me a bit about some of the learnings from this process of building momentum around ECSO and the cybersecurity movement? What have been pivotal? One thing is obviously Ukraine happening and everything kind of following thereafter. But I imagine that there are also steps you've taken that could be learned from by others.
You mean by other segments?
Yeah, by
besides?
other organizations that are trying to move forward their agenda within something else than cybersecurity.
I believe there are even other regions in the world looking to do the same that we have been doing here in Europe, right? There are other regions for whom cybersecurity is a very relevant topic. Don't have just alone country by country the critical mass to do anything, and they need to come together, join forces to be able to push for the development of their ecosystem. One of the things that was fundamental is to go to understand what was the marketing need at the moment, right? So startups not being able to find investors having to go to every European country to try to find startups. And so the matchmaking events was really fundamental. And then EXO has done an excellent job in creating the space for listening the needs from investors, from startups, in which were the next challenges. And it was not a quick process, don't get me wrong, but being persistent on developing those discussions, on involving more and more public institutions, I think it was really key, right? To the extent that then EIB also shown interest in approaching the subject in a very structured way, that was really fundamental. And then, of course, raising the attention also country by country, right? So getting to the process, several countries across Europe, so that we could build a momentum around our project.
I'd love to ask you also about AI specifically, because before we spoke about how everything is moving in the industry and the increasing importance. But I imagine that AI, to a large extent, has also rewritten a lot of the rules.
So on one side, attackers are using AI as well, and so they are always looking for ways to scale their attacks in sophistication, but also in terms of their addressable market. On the defense side, on the protection side, we also need to use it in our favor. If there will be a larger volume of attacks and our security teams are already overwhelmed, we need to understand how to use AI to automate our protection, right? So that's fundamental. How to write code in a secure way with the support of AI, for instance. How to help us better protect from fraud that is becoming more and more realistic because attackers are using AI, right? So there's a lot of fronts where AI is changing the way we do security and is actually mandatory for doing security right now. And I'm not talking about having the nice looking AI-based chat, right? That's nice as well, but there's much more to it, right? The other aspect is technology adoption by corporations across our region. One of the critical aspects that companies look at for implementing AI is securing their data, securing their knowledge, being compliant. Otherwise, it can pose a very serious threat to those organizations. Reputation, for starting with, right? So, addressing.
I just heard of a major pension fund that had rolled out AI across the company, and now they have people being able to ask the AI what is the CEO's number of meetings, or based on the CEO's calendar, how many work hours and stuff like
Exactly.
that. Not very fortunate.
Like there are several cases like that, and organizations are also learning, right? So organizations are learning on how to implement AI. Security for AI is being built, so it's not everything built right now. So everything that needs to do with compliance, with governance, with assessing the security of that stack, but also maintaining it secure when it is being used, right? So a lot is happening right now, and we need to look at it as an opportunity for investors, because there's an emergent market appearing. But we also need to be careful, because a company that is not using AI right now may be disrupted by another one that will appear in the short term with AI capability.
A common saying in anything related to defense or crime is that you will, by definition, always be behind the perpetrators. And I imagine that with AI, that is even more true than it has been before.
Let's see. Cybercrime is ahead of cyber spending.
Yeah.
So the cybercrime market is worth 10 trillion. The cyber spending market is 200 billion.
Yeah.
Right. So they probably have more money to keep developing their technologies.
Tell me, Carlos,
for now.
Tell me, Carlos, what are you doing investing in cybersecurity? You should be investing in cybercrime.
No.
I don't think that is a good investment strategy, though.
No.
Or at least it's hard to raise
not sustainable, or ethical. But there's a lot to be protected, right? And for sure, Europe needs to play at its scale, at its position, really needs to push for its ecosystem. It's not just about creating large organizations. That's, I believe, a very important message. Champions are not the champions of their own region. They need to be the global champions in certain segments. Otherwise, they will not be champions in a sustained way, right? So we need to create global champions. And for that, we need healthy investors ecosystem. We cannot just lock the best companies to the European market. We need to let them grow, to be invested by investors based in Europe, so that those companies don't need to go abroad.
Is there a natural conflict there in that venture automatically is global, also in where the capital comes from? Oftentimes we see companies starting here and moving to the US. Is there a natural problem when it comes to having that model marry with cybersecurity?
I don't believe so. Look, so at 33N, we are a global investor. We believe we are best positioned as investors to support companies growing this segment by being exposed to the most sophisticated market. Because how can we help a company in Europe to compete globally if we don't know what's happening in the US or what's happening in Israel? US companies, they also appreciate to have European-based investors because they want to address this market that is so relevant for them. So the other way around will also happen. So I believe that is positive for an European-based company to have capital from other regions. The diversity of capital adds value. The other thing is not to have alternatives in Europe to lead those investments and allow those companies to stay in Europe.
Could you tell me a bit about the market of investors that are most active in cybersecurity? Who are the people that people should know? Point to a database like Defense Investors have a specific place, one but run by our good friend at the former CIA guy, Eric. Is there a place like that for cybersecurity where everyone can go and understand what is the ecosystem like?
I think ECSO has a good mapping of the European ecosystem. But again, what I believe is that startups should look for investors that really can have value besides the money. And that value differs from stage to stage. Europe needs very strong regional early stage investors specialized in cyber. We need pan-European investors specialized in cyber. And we need to have VCs, global VCs, that can play head-to-head with their counterparts from other regions.
Yeah.
Right? So we need a very healthy ecosystem. And there are several options for that. But my strong advice is really for startups to look for VCs that can add more value than just the cash.
Yeah, which comes back to the importance of having specialists. I'd love, before we close, Carlos, just to hear about the Invest for Cyber Networking Night in Berlin. You're doing it during SuperVenture. I'd love to ask you two things. One, what is going to happen? Two, why is it that, and you've spoken about this already, but why is it that it's important to bring it to a place like SuperVenture?
First of all, we believe, and we have demonstrated it, that investing in cyber, so first of all, it's fun. Second, it's a good contribution for the community. And third, it's quite interesting from an investor standpoint because of the returns, right? LPs should be aware of this. Cyber is very fundamental, is a sector that has shown a very significant resiliency during these last 2-3 years and delivers interesting returns. And Europe needs funds with larger capacity. So why not to promote investment in European funds close to the LP base that will be at SuperVentures. So that's why this has been started already a few years ago, and is gaining now momentum because LPs are realizing that really this is an interesting segment to look at.
Just before we close, I want to ask one final question. That is, where do you see cybersecurity ending and defense starting? Or is it the same or sub-segment of defense? How should people think about that?
So cybersecurity is for sure a crucial element of defense, especially nowadays, where more autonomous devices, vehicles are used. So those systems need to be protected. There's a lot related with intelligence as well. So for sure, cybersecurity is critical. The other thing is, and to your question regarding the difference between cyber and the defense side, most of the technologies used on civilian cybersecurity can be applied to defense, right? And probably most of the companies we invest in have dual use for defense as well. Of course, there are technologies that are just used for defense. To those, the question is it a technology for defending ourselves or for attacking the other party, right? At the V3N, we prefer to be focused on the defense side. So first of all, we are not doing anything just for defense. So we are investing in cybersecurity for the civilian world, of course, with use cases on defense. But that's the line that we draw, right?
Yeah.
Technology that is used for defending ourselves, not for attacking.
It does sound like a very tempting business model to build for attacking, though, and then have a side business focused at the multi-trillion-dollar cybercrime space. But that's maybe someone else to pick up. Carlos, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
We're hosting an exclusive off-the-record LP AMAs, bringing together the people behind the capital who are shaping the next generation of venture funds. If you're in the middle of raising a fund or planning to and want to understand how LPs actually make decisions, this is the room you want to be in. No pitch decks, no posturing, no script. Just honest conversations between GPs and LPs. The upcoming AMA on the 21st of August is held by Jonathan Sibelia, partner at Bullhound Capital, and one of Europe's most experienced LPs. Before Bullhound, he led fund of funds and secondaries at Molten Ventures for 16 years, deploying into 80+ VC funds and backing breakout names like UiPath, Revolut, and Ledger. Jonathan brings a rare dual lens of direct investments and secondaries across thousands of fund reviews and real DPI outcomes. This is your chance to ask one of Europe's sharpest LPs how they really assess managers, secondaries, exit strategies, and what most GPs still get wrong, or anything else you're dying to know. Access to these AMAs are limited to EUVC community members. Don't miss your chance to be in the room. Head to eu.vc/subscribe to save your seat.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.